Welcome, dear students. Today we are going to learn about the status and scope of forestry. Forestry is a branch of science that deals with the creation, conservation, and scientific management of forests and the utilization of their resources. It is applied science which is concerned with not only the raising of cultivation of forest crops but their protection, perpetuation, mensuration, management, valuation, and finance, as well as utilization of the forest products for the service of the nation. In favorable localities, this science is applied to get maximum return, and so it is called intensive forestry, which is defined as the practice of forestry with the object of obtaining the maximum in volume and quality of products per unit area through the application of best techniques of silviculture and management. When forestry is practiced to achieve more than one purpose, it is called multiple use forestry, which is defined as the practice of forestry for the simultaneous use of a forest for two or more purposes, like the production of wood with forest grazing and wildlife conservation. Based on the objectives, forestry is classified as under protection forestry. Protection forestry is the practice of forestry with the primary object of protecting lands, whether those upon which the forest is situated or those at a distance from it. In this approach, the forests are not considered as mere growing stock but a complex ecological system which should be managed to obtain supporting and regulating services of forests. For example, in wildlife reserves and national parks, the objective is not to harvest forest produce and find ways to earn more revenue, but to maintain a good habitat to support the wildlife and biological diversity. Similarly, management of forests on hill slopes is not aimed at maximizing annual harvest and undertaking commercial plantations, but trying to conserve the vegetation for soil conservation and ecological development. Commercial forestry. Commercial forestry is the practice of forestry with the object of producing timber and other forest products as a business enterprise. A specialized aspect of commercial forestry is to meet the requirement of a particular industry, and in that case it is called industrial forestry, which is defined as the practice of forestry to sustain a given industrial enterprise, such as a sawmill, a pulp mill, chemical plant, or a combination of these. Social forestry. Social forestry is the practice of forestry on lands outside the conventional forest area for the benefit of rural and urban communities. Supply of fuel wood to divert cow dung from village hearths to village fields, small timber for rural housing and agricultural implements, fodder for the cattle of the rural population living far away from the forest areas, protection of agriculture by creation of diverse ecosystems and arresting wind and water erosions, and creation of recreational forests for the benefit of the rural as well as the urban population are the basic economic and cultural needs of the community, without which there can be no improvement in the condition of their living. This is a new dimension recently added to the concept of forestry and includes the following within its scope. Farm forestry. Farm forestry is the practice of forestry on farms in the form of raising rows of trees on bunds or boundaries of fields and individual trees in private agricultural land, as well as creation of windbreaks, which are protective vegetal screens created around a farm or an orchard by raising one or two lines of trees fairly close with shrubs in between. Extension forestry. Extension forestry is the practice of forestry in areas devoid of tree growth and other vegetation, and situated in places away from the conventional forest areas, with the object of increasing the growth under trees. It includes mixed forestry. Mixed forestry is the practice of forestry for raising fodder grass with scattered food trees, fruit trees, and fuelwood trees on suitable wastelands, panchayat lands, and village commons. Shelter belts. Shelter belt is defined as a belt of trees or shrubs planted in a rectangular grid pattern or in strips within and on the periphery of a farmland in order to act as a windbreaks. They help to reduce natural hazards including sandstorm, wind erosion, droughts, and frosts. They also improve microclimate and create more favorable conditions for crop production. The establishment of shelter belts play a very crucial role in sandy dry lands that are affected by wind, resulting in desertification. Linear strip plantations. These are plantations of fast-growing species on linear strips of land on the sides of public roads, canals, and railway lines. Recreational forestry. Recreational forestry is the practice of forestry with the object of raising flowering trees and shrubs, mainly to serve as a source of recreation for the urban and rural population. The main object is not to produce timber, grass, or leaf fodder, but to raise ornamental trees and shrubs in some areas to meet the recreational needs of the people. This type of forestry is also known as aesthetic forestry, which is defined as a practice of forestry with the object of developing or maintaining a forest of high scenic value. Agroforestry. Agroforestry has been defined as the sustainable land management system which increases the yield of land, combines the production of crops, forest plants, and animals simultaneously or sequentially on the same unit of land and applies management practices that are compatible with the cultural practices of the local population. Community forestry. The practice of forestry on lands outside the conventional forest area for the benefit of local population has been called as community forestry. Community forestry seeks the involvement of community in the creation and management of such forests. Elements for sustainable forestry include forest regeneration that will maintain and restore the aesthetics, vitality, structure, and functioning of the natural processes of forest ecosystem and its components. Forest practices will maintain and restore the surface and groundwater quality, quantity, including the aquatic habitat. Forest practices will maintain and restore natural processes of soil fertility, productivity, and stability. Forest practices will maintain and restore a natural balance in the diversity of native species of the area for long-term health of ecosystem. Natural regeneration of the native plants to protect the natural gene pool. No usage of chemical fertilizers. Local employment for the rural people with occupational safety for the workers. Protection of the sites of archaeological, cultural, and historical significance. Ensure scientific forest management. Carry out research in forestry and take decision on the basis of forestry research. Now we'll look upon the developments of forestry in India. Development of forestry by legislative and other measures have taken place in India right from the 19th century. These can be classified under acts and measures before the independence period and after the independence period. While the pre-independence initiatives laid the groundwork for technical administration and management of forests, the post-independence initiatives revitalized them to achieve the national objectives. The first National Forest Policy (NFP) in the post-independence period was formulated in 1952, acknowledging that many of the provisions contained in the old forest policy were good and therefore should be continued. The first national forest policy retained most of the elements of the old forest policy but incorporated some changes which had become necessary due to the developments in the intervening time period. Most notably, for instance, the new policy discouraged the indiscriminate extension of arable land by cutting of forests. Towards this end, the reclassification of forests made by the new Act based on their functional criteria is notable. The reclassification designated the types of forests as protected forests, national forests, village forests, and tree lands. Emphasizing the development of a system based on balanced and complementary land use, the policy laid stress on persuading the tribal people from the harmful elements of practicing shift cultivation, a method in which an area of forest is felled and burned to allow for crops to be grown on the cleared land, giving requisite training to the forest staff of all ranks, increasing the efficiency of forest administration by having adequate provisions in forest laws, controlling grazing in forests, and encouraging research in forests and forest product utilization. The NFP 1952 thus emphasized on the optimum use of available forest land. The National Forest Policy 1988 in its objectives laid emphasis on protection of existing forests and forest land, increasing forests and vegetation cover on hilly slopes, catchments of rivers, lakes, reservoirs, ocean shores, and semi-arid desert tracts. Discourage diversion of good and productive agricultural land to forestry. Encourage planting of trees alongside roads, railway lines, rivers, streams, canals, and other unutilized land under institutional and private ownership and raising green belts in urban and industrial areas. National Environmental Policy 2006. The National Environment Policy 2006 recognized that forest laws and formal institutions have undermined traditional community rights and disempowered communities. Such disempowerment has led to forests becoming open access in nature, leading to their gradual degradation in a classic sense of tragedy of commons. The policy advocates recognition of traditional rights of communities as a remedy of serious historical injustice. Forest Rights Act 2006. The Forests Right Act 2006 FRA, though was enacted in the year 2006, but its implementation started in the year 2008 after elaboration of implementation guidelines and rules. It recognizes a range of individual and communal rights on forest resources, including ownership and management of forest land, which have been neglected since colonial times. It not only aims to undo the historical injustice to the scheduled tribes and other traditional forest-dwelling communities, but also target to empower the communities for the responsibilities and authority for sustainable use, conservation of biodiversity, and maintenance of ecological balance. Forestry-agriculture interlinkage. The term forestry is traditionally used only for natural vegetation widely spread over vast stretches of land. It is used in the sense of wilderness, by which is meant the abundance of growth, giving shelter to many wild animals as their natural habitat. But in the context of declining forest area and the need felt to expand its growth, the natural feature has been extended to include man-made cultivation called tree cropping. The term agriculture, on the other hand, also refers to a wider form of cultivation, much beyond mere crop cultivation. In this extended sense, it includes livestock breeding, fishery, forestry, dairy, poultry farming, etc. Loss of forests is felt in a multidimensional manner, that is, through loss of biodiversity, ecological imbalance, and environmental degradation. The practice of forestry promoted to bridge this loss, including practicing of agriculture in areas such as non-forest land, village commons, and private lands. Forestry is thus complementary to agriculture in two main ways: ecologically by way of regulation of soil nutrients, moisture content in soil and microclimate, and economically through efficient utilization of underemployed rural youth and tribal human power. We can elaborate this agriculture forestry interface from three angles, such as land use pattern, human ecosystem, and ecological ecosystem. We'll discuss the land use pattern first. As land is a primary requirement for both agriculture and forestry. Under classical methods like shifting agriculture, land under forestry used to make way for agriculture. Under modern practices of social forestry, however, tree crops are grown in non-forest areas like private land and institutional premises. In this process, therefore, there is an element of agriculture making space for forestry. A range of agroforestry possibilities have thus come into vogue, in which the common aim is to conserve ecology, optimize land use, protect damages from external agents like wind and running water, and improve the aesthetic value of site, land, trees, crops, and livestock have thus come to be practiced symbiotically, each complementing the other for optimal utilization and conservation of the ecosystem. Human ecosystem. A large part of agricultural labor belong to the small and marginal farmer community. They are also of tribal community residing in and on the fringe of forests, depending on forest resources like timber and many non-timber forest products like medicinal plants, honey, spices, resins, seeds, nuts, etc. for their income and livelihood needs. Agriculture is a seasonal activity not only for forest-based tribal population but also for most others. Forests support them with off-season employment opportunities through plantation and other forest developmental activities undertaken by forest departments. Firewood, a main byproduct of trees in forests and elsewhere, constitutes the largest source of fuel for cooking and heating in rural areas. It is in view of these reasons that forests have always been an integral part of the human ecosystem. There is also the beneficial side of arresting the rural to urban migration by harnessing on the potential of forests. Ecological ecosystem. Forests sustain biodiversity by reducing global warming, balancing oxygen and carbon dioxide ratio, increasing precipitation causing rains, moderating local temperatures, and keeping the air cool and clean. The role of forests in slowing down the water runoff, distributing rainfall, preventing soil erosion, reducing wind damage, and safeguarding water supplies is valued much more than their output of wood and other things. The cumulative influence of all these factors on agricultural production and growth has indeed been immeasurable. The positive influence of the forests on the ecological parameters have always been of extreme relevance, which is being realized more now than before, particularly due to the damage to the ecological systems caused by factors like indiscriminate industrial and urban expansion in the recent past. Now we'll look to the status of forestry. The Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change released the India State of Forests Report ISFR 2021, which is an assessment of the country's forest resources. The highlights of the report are: India's forest and tree cover has risen by 2,261 square kilometers in the last 2 years, with Andhra Pradesh growing the maximum forest cover of 647 square kilometers. The total tree and forest cover in the country include an increase of 1,540 square kilometers of forest cover and 721 square kilometers of tree cover compared to the 2019 report. India's total forest and tree cover is now spread across 80.9 million hectares, which is 24.62% of the total geographical area of the country. The top 5 states in terms of increase in forest cover are Andhra Pradesh 647 square kilometers, Telangana with 632 square kilometers, Odisha with 537 square kilometers, Karnataka with 155 square kilometers and Jharkhand with 110 square kilometers. The gain in forest cover or improvement in forest canopy density may be attributed to better conservation measures, protection, afforestation activities, tree plantation drives and agroforestry. Among the mega cities in the country, Ahmedabad has been the biggest loser when it comes to the forest cover. Area-wise, Madhya Pradesh has the largest forest cover in the country, followed by Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Maharashtra. 17 states, union territories have about 33% of the geographical area under forest cover. Out of these states and union territories, Lakshadweep, Mizoram, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Arunachal Pradesh and Meghalaya have more than 75% of the forest cover. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change also encourages plantation in the country, including various metropolitan cities through programs and schemes such as Nagar Van Yojana, instituted for establishing the city forest in urban areas over 5 years at an estimated rupees 895 crores under the National Fund of the Compensatory Agroforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority CEMPA. 65 Nagar Van projects have been sanctioned for implementation in 22 states under Nagar Van Yojana. School Nursery Yojana, an initiative that aims to involve school students in raising plant nurseries to get them closer to the environment and help them understand the natural processes of sapling growth. Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority constituted in 2004 to administer the Compensatory Afforestation Fund CAF. The Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority Act seeks to lessen the consequences of the diversion of forest land for non-forest purposes by ensuring that the funds are disbursed and utilized swiftly, efficiently and transparently through a well-defined organizational mechanism. National Afforestation Program NAP. The National Afforestation Program NAP was formulated in 2002 by merging centrally sponsored afforestation schemes under the Ministry of Environment and Forests. The main objective of the National Afforestation Program NAP scheme is the ecological restoration of degraded forests and to improve the forest resources with people's participation, focusing on improving the livelihoods of the forest fringe communities. National Mission for Green India GIM. It attempts to protect, restore and develop India's forest cover and the response to climate change. The urban scheme fosters urban forestry, tree plantation on idle lands and bunds on agricultural land by involving local communities, NGOs, educational institutes, local bodies, etc. Potential forestry. The discussion clearly points to a number of policy and implementation challenges required in the forestry sector across the country. Strategies are suggested to address issues of forest degradation, climate changes, and livelihood of local people. Gap in the demand and supply of forest product is one of the major reasons for forest degradation across most of the country. Different types of strategies addressing demand and supply of these products have been suggested. Similarly, strategies to address other drivers of degradation such as forest fires, encroachments, weed infestation have been elaborated. Livelihood strategies constitute an important part of addressing different issues. Finally, strategies to adapt to climate change have been presented. Linkages needed to be established between research institutions, state forest departments, and private sector to produce good quality planting material. Forest Policy 1988 aims to bring 33% of the geographical area under forest cover. There has been an increase of only 5.71 million hectares in forest cover over the last 28 years, that is, from 1987 to 2013, due to financial, technical, and land availability issues. Use of alternative fuels should be increased. Expansion of LPG in rural areas can be expanded from 6 to 10% in the rural areas, which can save 1.22 million tons of fuel wood every year. Ecotourism has been exploited at a limited scale, but has the potential to become a major driver of local economies. The ecotourism program should be upscaled gradually by identifying hotspots, creating infrastructure and facilities with the help of private sector, and building the capacity of local communities. Legitimate rights of people under FRA should be recognized. Community rights for the management of forest resources which have been neglected so far should be considered. After recognition of legitimate rights, illegal occupants should be vacated with the help of local institutions. There are several bottlenecks for forestry enterprises in India. These include government control over profitable forest produce, constraining regulations, lack of credit availability, poor technologies, and low value addition. Requirement of transit permits and felling regulation for nationalized species discourages private enterprise. Forest-based communities should be trained as processing and value addition entrepreneurs. Implementation of climate adaptation measures such as checking forest fires and forest fragmentation should be implemented. Plantation of monocultures should be discouraged. 10 million hectares of existing degraded area can be improved through mix of plantation and assisted natural regeneration to improve the quality of the forests. Additionally, 5 million hectares can be brought under forest and tree cover through plantations on available common lands and private lands through social forestry and agroforestry measures. It would require additional finance resources allocation for the state forest departments. Claim to individual and community rights should be completed. Livelihood of the right holders should be strengthened through training them in modern agricultural, animal husbandry, and forest management. JFM institutions need to be strengthened through establishing strong linkages with Gram Panchayat and allocation of green funds. Village level green volunteers can be trained for conservation of natural resources. Research on impact of climate change on forest structure and various functions need to be undertaken and integrated with forest management. During this period, 20 million hectares of country's forest area can be treated for improving the forest quality in existing open and scrub forests through plantation and natural regeneration. 12 million hectares of additional area can be brought under forest and tree cover, which will make 27% of the geographical area under green cover. It would require sustained financial support and objective monitoring to reach such a target. We need to move from joint forest management to community forest management, where Gram Panchayats have complete responsibilities over the management of forests under their jurisdiction. Forest departments can provide the technical support and monitor the implementation of important policies. Small-scale forestry enterprises are linked to state and national markets through digital platforms, which will substantially improve the livelihood of local people. Research-based adaptation measures should be fully integrated into forest working plans and management practices. With this, we'll conclude today's